Hi, I'm Randy with B&W Equipment Repair in partnership with bwparts.com. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be removing the magneto and we're going to be installing electronic ignition. Well, basically what we're going to do before you start doing this is you're going to bring the engine over to where the DC mark comes into the window. Once you pull the magneto out of the place, you'll see that there'll be a mark, two marks on the governor and a single mark on the cam. You want to move the engine over until the single mark on the cam lines up with the two marks on the governor. As soon as you have it in that position, you're ready to do your install. Okay, we're back. What I've done is I've removed the magneto and I've installed a plate that comes with our kit. And in our kit, you want to make sure that there's a washer right here that will stop any oil from coming out the top hole. The top hole is exposed into the oil assembly. The bottom one is not. Make sure that on your back assembly, if it hasn't broke loose, that's fine. Just run the bolt up and put your nut on it. If it has broke loose, make sure that you have a gasket there and that you use RTV gasket sealer and seal it back off. Also, make sure that there's always a copper washer on the back side of this so that the oil doesn't seep past the bolt, because this area here goes into the engine compartment area where the oil is at. Okay, so our next step is to remove the Welch plug out of the top of the block, out of the head. We're going to install a distributor shaft, the distributor, the coil, spark plug wires, and then we're going to run our wires to the front and tie in the whole system. Okay, we're back. Now, what we've done so far is we've removed the magneto and we've installed a block-off plate. Now we're back up onto the top of the engine, and what we're going to be doing first, because if you're doing this in your water pump, in your radiator and everything is installed, and you've got coolant in the system, then the first thing we want to do before we knock out the Welch plug is we want to go ahead and install the stud for your hold down. That's why the stud comes with pipe dope already on it. Also comes with a jam nut on there that you can use to do a quick install. So you want to be prepared for coolant to come out of this hole right here when you put the stud in place. So you want to do this very quickly. Now if you're building the engine and you haven't put any coolant in the system, no big deal. But if you have, I don't want you to have that Welch plug out of place and have coolant go into your motor. So this is very important that you take this step and do it the correct way first before you expose the inside of the engine. Alright, we're back. Now what I've done is I've removed the plug or the bolt with the copper washer on it. Hold on to the copper washer. They really come in handy for the Continental engine. So put it in your box, don't lose it. Seems like it's really hard to come up with the copper washers nowadays. So anyway, we have the stud in place. We have the hold down. We have the lock washer and the nut. So we're just going to set that off to the side for now. But now we're ready to go ahead and knock the Welch plug out. So what you're going to need for knocking the Welch plug out is a punch and a hammer. Then all you're going to do is line it up in the center. You're going to drive the punch through the center of the Welch plug, and then once you've got it driven through the side of the Welch plug, you're just going to grab a hold of it, turn the punch and the whole assembly sideways until you pop that Welch plug out of place. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Okay, so I've driven the center punch through the Welch plug, and I'm just going to tap it over till I get it out. Then I'm going to make sure that there's no debris, and usually it'll catch all of it once that's out of place. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing the distributor shaft inside the hole. Now basically what you're going to see is here's your oil pump. This has got a slot on it, and you're going to drop this down to where this fits onto the slot, just like that. Now inside the engine there is a center bushing that aligns both of these up so that they're squared with each other and they won't bind up. So that's basically your next step that you're going to be doing, is you're going to be dropping this in, and then you're just going to move it with your finger until you feel it drop into the slot. Once it's dropped into the slot, then you're ready to drop in your distributor. Your distributor also has a slot that's in the middle of it that has a shoulder around it that also holds that in place. So when you drop it in, you want to make sure that your wires are on this side of the engine so that you can put them onto the coil. So pop your cap off. Use your rotor to do your alignment because your rotor is attached to that assembly. And as soon as it lines up, the distributor will drop in. So push it all the way to the bottom. Make sure that you move the rotor back and forth to make sure that it is in the slot, right? And now you're ready to put your hold down in place and to go ahead and set your hold down and your nut and lock washer in place. They don't need to be tight because you're not really ready for that yet. So once it's in place, you're going to look at the position of your rotor and your assembly. If your assembly is going to bump up against the center stud and you don't have it in the position that you want it in, then you're going to move it to the opposite side to where the little tabs on the bottom are not going to be in your way. So once you get that drop back down and you've got the angle and you're able to move your distributor back and forth without it binding up against the studs, then you're in perfect shape. So now your rotor is pretty much in position to where it's not going to move and it's not going to spin or whatnot, but your housing is going to be able to spin. So what you're going to be doing is wherever that rotor's facing, you've got your front gears lined up on the punch marks for the timing. You've got your DC in the window, and that's going to be on the compression stroke on number 4. So you're going to look at your cap, and you're going to put your cap on. Your cap only goes on one way. You're going to put your cap in place, and you're going to face whatever one of on the top of the cap is closest to the rotor, and you're going to turn the distributor until that spot on your cap lines up with the rotor, which is right there. Then what you can do is you can just mark this or whatever. Go ahead and put your hold down and tighten it just slightly enough to where it's not going to move around. So basically you're going to mark your cap. That's now your number 4. Rotor faces toward number 4. Now, distributor's a little bit different than a magneto. This is on the back side of the cam gear. So instead of it rotating clockwise, it rotates counterclockwise. Your firing order is still the same, 1, 3, 4, 2. So now you've got number 4 is designated. So you've got 1, 3, 4, 2. So now you can go ahead and put your spark plug wires and everything in place as long as you don't move the distributor out of its spot. Okay, we're back. Let's go over a little overview of what we've done. We removed the magneto. We installed a block-off plate. We removed the Welch plug on top of the motor. We dropped our distributor shaft in. We installed the distributor. We installed the spark plug wires and the spark plugs. Now, and this is a biggie, the spark plug gap on electronic ignition is different from a magneto. The magneto spark was 25 thousandths. The spark for electronic ignition is between 30 and 32 thousandths. Hotter spark because you have more power from a distributor than you do a magneto. You also don't have to have the solid core wires anymore that you have with the magneto. Now you can go with a suppressant wire that you can get from bwparts.com. One of the good things about doing a magneto swap to electronic ignition is that the magneto, in the long run, parts are a lot harder to get. They're more obsolete. To rebuild a magneto, you're upwards in a $400 range. Once you've spent the money for the electronic ignition switchover, now all you're having to do is change out the cap and the rotor, and that's it. So now you don't have to bring it into a mechanic shop, spend money. You can do it yourself, have a couple extra ones in your truck. So the next step is for us to install the coil and to install the ignition switch and the wires for the ignition switch. Okay, we're back. What I've done, just as an overview, is I've removed the magneto. I put a block-off plate on that side. I've made sure that the engine is on top dead center so that the DC mark on your flywheel is in the window. I've removed the Welch plug, dropped in the distributor shaft, dropped in the distributor, lined it up on the number 4, put my spark plug wires on counterclockwise. Firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2. It's also stamped on the top of your head. I've installed the coil. One thing before you hook up your wires, make sure that the red goes to the plus and the negative goes to the minus. They also gave you a way to not make a mistake on hooking them up wrong. The one on the red has a little tab that goes on the coil that is smaller than the one that's on the black, so that it's hard to make a mistake. Once they're in place, leave those little tabs there in case you have to do any other work. If you hook that up backwards, you'll take up the module inside the distributor. So you want to make sure that these wires are hooked up correctly. Once you have that done, you're going to be running a wire from the positive side to your ignition switch, and from your ignition switch over to the hot side of your starter solenoid. Or you can run it up to amp gauge or anything up front that has power when the unit is off. Once that part's installed, then you're going to go ahead and crank the switch, turn it to the on position, crank over the engine, get the engine to fire up by moving this to the left or to the right. Once it fires up, then what you're going to do is you're going to get your timing light. You're going to hook up your timing light to number 4. You're going to shine the timing light into the window, and you're going to move the distributor until the DC mark comes up. You need to have your RPMs down as low as you can get it to keep the timing out of the distributor, so that you can get that to stay in the window in the proper spot. The lower the better. If you can get it to elope at 400 RPMs, perfect. Once you get that set up and you get this locked down and the DC is in the window, then you can go ahead and bring your RPMs up. And your RPMs, when you're bringing your RPMs up, on your rheostat, you can turn your rheostat over to 100. You can use a ohm meter or whatever across there, or I mean a voltmeter, and check your OCVs. You need to have your RPM speed at low idle high enough to where you have at least 30 to 34 volts going from the exciter voltage to the stator. If you don't have that, if you have it too low, when you go to strike an arc, it won't come to high idle. So make sure that all that's in play before you finish the job. If you're out in the field and you don't have a timing light and all that, then what you can do is you can go ahead and move this back and forth until it fires up. Keep your RPMs up to where it's higher at high idle. You're going to have one of your buddies weld in third gear with like some 1/8 inch rod, and you're going to move the distributor back and forth until the exhaust starts to quiet down. Once the exhaust is in the most quiet position, go ahead and lock down the distributor and you're done. Make sure that you install all your parts with BW parts, like the oil filter assembly, the coil assembly, the exhaust, governor, magneto parts, carburetors. All the parts that are on this machine are from BW parts.